A new Star Wars journey begins in the place all good journeys begin. At, well, the beginning. This Star Wars Day, I'm excited to introduce the new Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, where we will piece together the complete story of that galaxy far, far away in timeline order, from the dawn of the Jedi through the great unknown following the sequel trilogy. This is a podcast for both Star Wars superfans and complete newbies. Listen to the short intro episode now to hear how it works and what to expect over the coming weeks as we set the stage for the new television series The Acolyte, which we will be covering with weekly breakdowns. Subscribe to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast wherever you listen to take part in one of the most epic and expansive stories ever told, following all the twists and turns from start to finish. May the 4th be with you all month and beyond. Hey Star Wars fans, it's time to get cute. Today we're talking season 1 of Young Jedi Adventures on Disney+, and I promise there's some lovable characters and valuable lore tucked away in this preschool targeted preamble to phase 1 of the High Republic multimedia project. And there's also things we might see in the Acolyte and beyond. So don't worry if you haven't seen the show yourself. We'll tell you what you need to know. And who's we? I'm your host, Elysia. And when you hear lore on this podcast, you know Jedi Bob's voice can't be far behind. Bob, thank you for binging this series so we can talk about it today. Have you tried out a Nubs impression yet?
Oh boy, he is way too high for me to do. D. Bradley Baker is just insane when it comes to everything that he can do. I believe I will leave that to the master. Not only can he do clones, but he can also get extremely cute when he wants to.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, the person who voices Nubs is D. Bradley Baker, and he is a legend in, the voice work industry. He's especially known, he did all the voices in The Bad Batch, and outside of Star Wars, he's especially known for Avatar: The Last Airbender, where he did he does people and he does animals. So in Avatar, he did all the iconic animals, like Momo and Appa. He's a legend.
I can't believe he goes as far back as Legends of the Hidden Temple doing Olmec. When I was a kid, I mean, how was I to know? Yeah, how was I to know he was going to make a huge splash in Star Wars years and years later? He's been in the business for just such a long time and so freaking good at it too.
Yeah. Well, as for it being too high for you, you said the same thing about the kid when we did The Greatest Gift for the Christmas special in Will Shift Dust, and you nailed that. So just saying, don't sell yourself short.
Cool.
You're D. Bobby Baker. Yeah. Anyway, listeners, welcome. We're recording this episode on May 24th, 2024, and the content of this podcast was accurate and up to date when recorded to the best of our knowledge, but that might change as more content is released. So we'll issue update episodes from time to time to cover anything that's been added or changed to the timeline. And we're going to be spoiling basically anything that happens up to this point in Star Wars history. And actually for this era right now, since we already gave the overview of the High Republic era, we're going to be spoiling any events in Star Wars history up until the year 132, which is the year that the Acolyte takes place. But we'll do our best not to spoil anything that happens after the Acolyte until we get to that point in the timeline. This episode does build heavily on our discussions of the High Republic overview, so I recommend listening to that episode first, but you do you. If this is your first episode and you want to hear more, I recommend starting with the quickie intro ep to learn how this podcast works and key world-building elements, and you'll find that at the top or the bottom of the list, depending on how your podcaster arranges it. And also, there's a link in the show notes to a blog post that gives you more insight into what's covered in each episode so far and what's coming soon. So, Young Jedi Adventures. Were you glad to jump back into this world, Bob?
I was. It's been an ongoing journey for me over the past, I don't even know how long it's been airing, but it's always been fun to come back to in between reading the High Republic books and other Star Wars titles. Um, just a nice little show to watch with lunch or dinner or just man, I love
Yeah.
these kids. They're a great bunch of Jedi younglings.
Yeah, they're very lovable.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so this is a Disney Junior show. It's actually two shows. So there's, if you want just a taste for yourself, start with the shorts. They're separate in the Disney Plus app, and they're 6 minute shorts, so you can watch the whole thing in half an hour. And then for the show itself, there's 25 double episodes. So each episode is about, 25 minutes with two stories in it, each one being like 12 to 15 minutes, except the finale,
It
which is
reminds
one
me
whole.
of the way that Nickelodeon used to do a lot of their Nicktoons. You'd get two 15-minute episodes per half an hour for things like Doug and Rugrats and Rocco's Modern Life in the 90s.
Oh, I guess that's true. I forgot about that. I definitely used to watch their shows, but I
Yeah.
forgot that they did that format. Yeah, they also have, by the way, if you prefer book form for your kids, they have some young reader adaptations of certain episodes. But Bob, between the short and the like 12, 15-minute episodes, which format do you think you prefer? Do you like one better
Um,
than the other?
Probably the 12 to 15-minute episodes in the actual show. But
Okay.
yeah, I think everything was still pretty good. I'm a pretty big fan of Star Wars shorts as well as the actual episodes. So
Yeah, so they released the shorts. They released three at once and then three weekly in April and May of 2023. And then the show, they did an interesting release schedule. They had four different batches of 6 to 7 episodes each. And they released those between May 4th, 2023 and February 14th, 2024. So over like 10 months of time. Now, Bob, I saw tweets from you when it first started. You were on board, but then I guess when it came back for later batches, it wasn't the first thing you put on the top of your list to catch up on.
yeah, I got way behind on that. I don't even remember what I was up to when it came back. I don't even know if I was aware that it came back right away. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like one day I was just looking on Disney Plus and it's like, oh, they made more episodes of this. Wow. I don't remember if they did like a we're returning trailer or not that I missed, but it was just something that slipped under my radar, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah, it's an interesting release schedule because it feels like people can forget about it. Then
Hmm.
it seems like a few people were tweeting more in the beginning and then it dwindled off.
Yeah.
But it's, of course, it's not really geared toward us.
Yeah, definitely.
Though I think the writing got more interesting in the back half.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's exactly how I felt when I started watching the last 10 or so double episodes, I think.
Yeah, in the first half, there's one episode that's literally the same plot as an episode of Star Wars Resistance, which I've also been watching. So yeah, they were kind of phoning it in a little on the writing in the first half.
Ah, I wish I could remember a lot of the first half. I feel like I watched those so long ago that some of the plot points escape me, but I know I had a good time with it.
Yeah, it's cute, but it's very much like an adventure of the week. It's something you can put on in the background while you're doing something else, and you'll get the
Exactly.
point. And there's always a moral, you're learning a lesson about not being selfish or, being patient, things like that.
Right.
So the premise of the show overall, now I'm going to quote Wikipedia here because it's actually better than the official Disney description. The description is set during the High Republic era, centuries before the events of the main Star Wars films. Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures follows a group of younglings as they learn the ways of the Force, including compassion, self discipline, teamwork, and patience to become Jedi Knights. It's set in 232 BBY, and we know this because the season finale includes a dedication of Starlight Beacon, which we talked about a lot in the last episode. And so this is exactly 100 years before the Acolyte takes place. The series was produced by Lucasfilm Animation and Wild Canary Animation, with Michael Olson as showrunner and Elliot Bohr as supervising director. And it is the first full-length animated Star Wars series targeted at young audiences. I guess, yeah, they get to make it the first. They really have to add some extra titles on there because there are more minisodes for young kids. Have you watched those?
Minisodes. I don't think so. The mini ones.
I've watched some of them. We'll definitely watch some more later as this podcast goes on. But like I've watched the ones they have. Oh, I can't even remember the name of it, but they have a bunch of the female characters with like little extra stories, and those were really good.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah. Was it? Yeah, I can't remember the name at the moment either. It escapes me.
That's yeah, that's an anthology series, so we'll just like sprinkle that in to with other things as we go through the history.
Excellent.
Um, but yeah, this does it follows a group of younglings, and as they start the first episode on Coruscant, which is again the capital city planet, where the main Jedi temple was. But during this High Republic era, they were sending Jedi out to Jedi outposts all over the galaxy, including in the Outer Rim. So these three younglings are sent to go train on a planet in the Outer Rim called Tanu. Would you want to live on Tanu, Bob?
It does seem like a really friendly place to live. I think the atmosphere seems very warm and very inviting, and there's a lot going on. It's a very busy planet, according to the audio description.
Yeah, it seems it's the planet's invented for the show, but it's very green. It seems to have a pleasant climate. There's lots of cool animals and plant species. There's like some chill towns with people. Got that laid back vacation vibe. It kind of feels like we've got the local town that they're often going to is called Kublop Springs, and it's
Mhm.
home to they're always hanging out at Hap Sap Tap. Like who doesn't want to hang out at Hap Sap Tap?
Yeah, I always get hungry scenes with Hap show up because he's always cooking something or talking about some kind of dessert he wants to make.
Yeah, exactly. So Hap is a Latero, which is they're kind of like if cats could stand on their back legs and had four arms on top.
Wow.
um, yeah, I don't know if but more like loth cats, which we'll also talk about later this episode. Um, but yeah, the most famous one of which is from the Jedi games, Captain Grease Drutus. But anyway, that's Hap. If anyone wants to explore themselves, there is supposed to be a game called Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures Galactic Training as a free online browser game developed by Disney Interactive set during the events of this show. But I have to say, I tried to play it's on Disney Now. I tried to play it on Disney Now and it would not load for me. It might be because sometimes they make Europe has like really stringent privacy laws and not all American websites comply. So sometimes we can't, open certain US sites. But if anyone gets to play it, I'm very curious to hear what it's like. So, Bob, do you have a favorite of the main characters?
Let me see. I think it's probably Liz. I
Okay.
like her attachment to animals. Well, not attachment because Jedi don't have those, but I like her ability to connect with them.
Mm-hmm.
That really stood out to me as a big animal lover. So,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
Nubs, it's
Mm-hmm.
so hard to pick a favorite though because they're such a fun group, and
Mm-hmm.
I think they play off of each other very well as a team.
Yeah. So Liz Soleil, I think if she's in some way, she seems like the leader of the group, although I think Kai would like to think that he is.
Yeah.
But Liz Soleil, she is a Pandoran who, like a character we meet later in the timeline, Clone Wars fans will know, Ruri Chuchi. So she's got blue skin with purple hair and like a purple blush across her face with like little um little moon-shaped crescents on her cheeks. It's very, very pretty. And her hair it's inspired by a famous hairstyle from the original movie where, people often mimic by putting bagels over their ears. You know who I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
But in this case, it's like they took two bagels on each side and linked them through each other and gave her like a little pigtail like that look. So she's super cute. Uh, um, and yeah, she's played by Julia Donenfeld, who's one of the only actual kids in the cast. Indeed, she's an animal lover, and the showrunner said she was modeled after his own daughter, to which I say, that you, Dad? No, but I'm with you, Bob. I always love characters who love animals, especially if they're designed in my favorite colors. And they have finely coiffed sartorial nods to one of my all-time favorite characters.
Yeah.
I feel like you talk about Nubs the most, though.
Yeah, I find him quite interesting because his his language is not exactly basic, but you can tell pretty much
Right.
what he's saying with every interjection that he makes. Now, there are a few words in Star Wars basic that he does utter sometimes, I think. So it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting to listen to him and the other younglings having a conversation. It reminds me of a certain Wookiee from the films.
Okay. Yeah, well, he reminds me in that way. So he speaks Poobian because he's a
Yeah.
pooba. He's a little blue fuzzy bear creature who's a lot of people seem to predict that he's going to go dark as an adult. But indeed, you can sometimes like make out the words that he's saying. He's voiced by D. Bradley Baker. And so that reminded me of Kenny in South Park, but a much cleaner version.
Yeah.
Apparently, D. Bradley Baker, by the way, voiced 19 roles in this show, both people and animals. But yeah, Nubs, gotta love him too because he loves plants, which I'm terrible with plants personally, but he also loves food, and I love food.
Yeah, so do I.
He'll never miss a meal if he doesn't have to.
Yeah.
There was also, by the way, this May, just like a couple weeks ago, on May 4th, 2024, there was a Young Jedi Adventures free comic book day giveaway. And this one was a story. There was a crossover with him and a character named Court, who's a character from the High Republic comics mostly. So we'll talk about him when we talk about phase 1 of the High Republic. But yeah, I didn't get to read the comic because it's not available on Marvel Unlimited. Hopefully it will be. Don't know where to find it. I saw like the first couple pages and it's cute. It looks like the characters, and so Star Wars Net did get to read it, and they gave this summary. They said the issue follows Nubs as Yoda forces him and Court to partner up. Nubs is nervous because he is afraid nobody will be able to speak Poobian. But of course, Court doesn't talk much basic himself, so that doesn't jive well with Nubs. This was a fun ride. Andy Dugan's art was vibrant, and the issue left me wondering if the comic medium might be the place to take the stories of Kai, Liss, and Nubs. Ooh.
Wow.
I mean, I think it's nice if there's more comics, but indeed, Bob, as you point out, that leaves you out.
Yeah.
And I do think that one of the strengths of this show was the audio. I mean, the voice acting.
Yes. And I think everyone sounded like they were having a ball with the script. You could tell by their performances, by the way that they delivered all of their lines. They weren't just phoning it in. I think they had a really good time with each episode's plot and just really giving it their all when it came to performing all of the lines.
Yeah. Yes, and so we have our third Jedi to talk about, which is Kai Brightstar, played by Jamal Avery Jr. And apparently Jacoby Swain did some of his scenes in the finale, and these are also proper kid actors, by the way. And Swain, who did scenes toward the end, also appeared like as a live action kid in the Obi-Wan show. So there's a certain con artist in that show who has a kid helping him, and he was that kid.
Oh, that kid. Okay. I was wondering why I thought he sounded familiar at some points in the finale. I was like, okay, now I get it.
So Kai is a human. He has dark skin and he has like a tidy little frohawk. So he's like the cool kid who's still clean cut enough to take home to meet your parents, you know? That's the vibe. And he's really into being a Jedi. He's always the one who wants to train and be the best. And I think one of the things I liked about the later episodes is they introduce a foil for him, his rival Jovi Resmia.
Mhm.
Then we saw, him start to lose his temper a little bit when he can't do what he wants to do, which I think a lot of kids could relate to.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite, episodes when they had to pair up and go on their little mission together, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, and also he got a cave episode. There's a trope in Star Wars stories where a Jedi goes into one of these mystic caves and they are confronted with visions and they have to choose for themselves the light or the dark side. And I think that's actually where they push things the furthest for this kid show in this season.
Yeah, I was not expecting that either. That as well as the finale, I think that they were 2 that really stood out to me, in the back half.
Yeah, yes, definitely. And Kai's also the best pilot of the 3 Jedi kids, but they meet an even better pilot when they go to Tanu, a girl called Nash Durango, played by Emma Berman. And I had to laugh, Bob. I copied your tweet into my notes. You said, I wonder how young you have to be to pilot in the Star Wars galaxy. Nash is like, what, 11 or 12? Anakin was doing it at age 9, so I guess it's not a big deal for kids.
Yeah, that really impressed me when we were first introduced to her in the pilot. My first thought was, "Wow, how long has she been doing this? What situation must her family be in for her to, get paid to ferry people back and forth from planet to planet?" Uh, this kid is, insanely good as a pilot. I loved, the first couple of scenes with her. I was hoping they'd go into, how she got into that, and, yeah, she's a very cool character. One of my favorite pilots, I think, in the new timeline. Loved what they did with her in the show.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun. She
Yeah.
helps her moms run. She has 2 moms. She helps them run a carrier business, and she's a local to Tanu, and her ship is called the Crimson Firehawk. And I like the episode where they have to lead a bunch of Firehawk babies to a nesting site, and
Yeah,
she like dresses up her ship.
yeah, that was really cool.
And she has a droid who's always with her called RJ-83, which is similar to a BD unit, which are little explorer units designed to gather and store information. And these units can perch on your shoulder. But RJ-83 has a BB-8 cap, like the droid BB-8 is what the top of his head looks like.
Yeah, yeah,
And he's
cool.
voiced by Jonathan Lippo. Somebody pointed out on Reddit that RJ-83 might refer to Return of the Jedi, which was released in 1983.
That sounds very plausible.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
So we have also some secondary but important characters, like their teacher, Master Zia Zaldor Zana,
Lots of
who's just
Z's.
mostly just called Master Zia. And she's human and if she were on, in our galaxy, I would guess she was from Southeast Asia. She's played by Nasim Pedrat, who's an actress you've probably seen in different places. I mostly know her from New Girl, where she played Winston's girl. Did you ever watch New Girl, Bob?
I haven't yet. I'm probably going to now, though. I'm interested in seeing, what else she can do, because she just really impressed me in Star Wars, as a Jedi, so
Yeah, she plays a cop in this show, but
ah, cool.
she's very it's the entire show is very entertaining. So I recommend it in general. I think that you would like it. It's a feel good kind of silly show.
Alright, I'm definitely
Sitcom.
gonna put that on the list.
So this is gonna sound petty because I liked the character, but I didn't like the animation. So I didn't like when she came on screen because there was something about the way, especially her mouth was animated, that bothered me a little bit. Which is it's something that so Hjalti, we have a guest. I'm going to drop in a conversation with a guest later in this episode who is a professional animator, and he's able to articulate it a little more, but that's a critique I have to give.
Awesome.
But yeah, so sometimes the voice acting is better than the art to me.
Wow. So I love when you guys point stuff like that out, because there's just not a lot in terms of the way that they can go into describing certain visuals. And it
Right.
just goes back to seeing Star Wars through the eyes of so many fans, because there's always going to be something new that gets pointed out to you. I wouldn't mind whole commentaries devoted to animation and things like that regarding these shows, because that is a field I know very little about. So it's always fun to explore that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be good if they did more behind the scenes.
Mhm.
But I guess they're not going to say, well, we didn't give as much money to this one as we did to the shows for older audiences. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so Master Zia, she has a droid with her, D, and I'm not sure what kind of droid this is. So if anyone knows, please write in at swtimelinepodcast@gmail.com. But D has a humanoid shape. And there's also another droid who's often floating around called Cam, which is a camera droid. Get it? Ha ha. Kind of like a little spherical droid with a lens. And this is actually a crossover with Star Wars Galaxy of Creatures, which is anthology shorts. So we'll talk about Cam more later in the timeline. And that brings us to the teacher of the children's teacher, Master Yoda. So, Bob, do you do a Yoda impression?
Oh man, being put on the spot is very difficult.
All right, all right. If you feel like it later.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but we have, in this case, we have Piotr Michael doing his best Yoda impression. And how do you think he stacks up to other Yodas?
Well, for a couple of seconds when he started delivering the lines, I actually thought it was Frank Oz. That's
Mm,
how good I thought he was, and I tweeted to him, I think after the pilot, and let him know, how good I thought he was, and he actually, responded with a really big thank you. So that was my
yeah.
brush with Star Wars voice celeb greatness there. So I was really honored that he actually responded there. That was a really cool day.
Worthy you are.
Yes. Mm.
See? Nailed it. So we mentioned in previous episodes that Yoda was born in 896 BBY, so 896 years before the original movie, which makes him in 232, he's 664 years old. And whereas later he has no hair, in this he has some short white hair. And of course, we know tantalizingly little about his life before this, where he comes from, or anything about his species. We just know he's been training Jedi for more than 500 years at this point. We know he was training Jedi by 796 BBY when Yoda was 100. He's the species he comes from is like gnome-like with greenish skin with massive pointy ears, and they're adorable but look like old men even as infants. And we've met also a female of the species who is in the High Republic books as well, named Yaddle. And Yaddle will also be in later materials. But she's out there somewhere now during Young Jedi Adventures. She's 274 years old, so quite young. And there's also, you've probably maybe heard about another baby version of this species named Grogu, who is, as far as we know now, not Yoda's baby. Who
Yeah.
knows? But Grogu won't be born for another 270 or so years after this. So he's not even a glimmer in Yoda's eyes. No, I'm just kidding. Definitely Yaddle's kid. I'm joking.
Yeah, that was my
Um,
first thought. I'm joking too.
Joking, ha ha ha. No, but really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, these are the only three characters of that species that we've ever met. And one thing we know is that they are all powerful wielders of the Force. And but Yaddle has normal sentence structures I always find funny. So yeah, Grogu isn't really talking yet, but Yoda was either raised somewhere other than Yaddle or he's just being weird on purpose.
It's interesting because in some episodes of Young Jedi Adventures, I noticed that Yoda tends to use a bit more of normal sentence structure in this animated show. I wish
The
I could
yeah,
think of some instances off the top of my head, but I was like, oh, hey, he can speak forwards when he needs to.
the writers are like, we can't keep this up.
Yeah.
Maybe he just like maybe he just put up started doing this weird phrasing as he gets even older than this, just to, be the crazy old man who scares people away.
Yeah.
It's like, can't even talk to me. You can.
Screwing with your head, I am.
Yeah. Um, but anyway, yeah, the lifespan of this species is clearly very long, but we will talk another time about how long. Spoilers. But we know someone around age 500 is considered to be middle aged, though it seems they spend the first 50 years of their life in infancy and mature to adulthood between ages 50 and 100, as evidenced by Yoda training other Jedi by that point. That's, yeah. What do you make of that, Bob?
I hope that we get to explore a bit of that in later material. His species is so interesting and mysterious to me. Not that I want to learn everything about it, because I think the enigma is, I think, such a big part of who Yoda is. But I wouldn't mind little tantalizing tidbits kind of dropped here and there over time.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm hoping that they explore this species a little bit more. It's fun to have the mystery, but it's also fun to get answers.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so Yoda, he's a teacher here, but he's a teacher of so many characters we're going to be discussing. It's estimated that over his lifetime he trained around 20,000 Jedi. And by the High Republic, at this point, he's considered a great Jedi Master, and he also has a seat on the Jedi High Council, and yeah, actually the rank of Grand Master. There's only two other Jedi at this moment in time, Zo Laru and Preeta Viter, who share that Grand Master title with him. So he's already at this point one of the three most important Jedi alive. Bob, do you have any favorite side characters in this show?
Favorite side characters. I know there is one droid that we meet later on. I guess he could be considered a side character. He's an older droid from, older, an older time period, and I think his name is OG. He really interested me when he showed up. He kind of shows up a few times in the show. He's the I guess he's something of an archivist, because he's always
Mm,
gathering Jedi artifacts and um, bringing them back to Tanu. And I do believe he's voiced by Michael. I think it's pronounced Interniclus. I can't pronounce that last name because I
yeah,
haven't really
sure.
found any interviews with him on YouTube. But he used to voice Leonardo in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003. So
Oh.
awesome to hear Michael providing a voice for Star Wars.
Oh, very cool. Good answer.
And
Um,
yeah, Sam Riegel, who also stars in the show in various voice roles. He did Donatello in the 2K3 version of TMNT. So it's kind of awesome to have uh, two Turtle alumni show up in Young Jedi Adventures.
yeah, that's really cool. I'm gonna go with I love an adventurous princess, so I'm gonna go with Princess Inaya, who shows up for one episode, and we don't know what planet she's from, but she was cool. She had a droid PD4.
Yeah, yeah, I liked her too.
Yeah, there are some recurring characters. It's 25 episodes, but it's actually 50 episodes and then plus the shorts. So we won't go into all the recurring characters, but there are some key cameos. Now we have major character from the High Republic books showing up named Bel Zettifar and played in the show by, and this is a voice, I'm not nearly as good as you, Bub, at recognizing voices, but this is a voice I recognize right away, Marcus Scribner. Um, I know him from, he plays like the oldest brother on Blackish and the spinoff Grownish. So I immediately recognize that voice as Belle.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, so he basically was brought in because it's someone that Kai will look up to, and he's a Padawan at that age. He's stationed also out in the on the rim, and yeah, for these characters from the High Republic books, if their story is not central to the main plot, or if they're not going to be alive for the Acolyte, then we won't spoil their stories. And that's not a spoiler to say he won't be alive because the Acolyte takes place 100 years later, and
Yeah.
humans. Do you think humans in Star Wars should have longer lifespans? Because they don't. They have what we have, but
Yeah. I mean, it almost seems like they should live a little longer, but I mean, hey, I'm used to us not living that long, so it doesn't really bug me too much.
yeah, yeah. But you would think, I don't know, I guess medicine's not better or the stresses of being in a wide, wide galaxy.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to know Belle Zettifar's story already, you can Google it. Otherwise, read the books, and we will cover it when we break down the phase one of the books. For now, he does not show up alone. He shows up with his master, Loden Greatstorm, who is one of the greatest teachers in the Jedi Order. And so Bell is a human, and Loden is a Twi'lek or Twi'lek. Which do you say, Bob?
I'm so used to Twi'lek because that's
Yeah.
how they used to pronounce it in the 90s abridged audiobooks. But either one, I mean, I hear both now and I'm like, yeah, either one, I don't care.
It feels like we're supposed to say that the Twi'lek is the correct pronunciation now, but I could have sworn it was always Twi'lek before.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's one of the greatest Jedis. He's a Twi'lek. So yeah, we talked about those a bit in the Knights of the Old Republic games episode, but they are important species that come back again and again. Humanoid. They have these two kind of fleshy appendages that come from their head called leku. And yeah, we'll talk about them more when we see their home planet. But Loden, he carries a yellow saber, like my favorite character. Everything's about my favorite character you haven't met yet. And yeah, noticeably, Loden does not show up with Belle in the finale, but preschoolers aren't ready for that story yet. And we're not going to
No.
spoil it in this episode either. That's going to be in the High Republic phase breakdown. But interesting to see how this show just kind of skirts events like that.
I had another freak out moment when I found out that Matt Yang King voices Loden Greatstorm because I play a
Ah,
lot of Mortal Kombat 1 and Injustice 2 from NetherRealm Studios. And I think Matt voiced the Atom in Injustice, but he definitely voices Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat 1 and Mortal Kombat 11 from the previous timeline. So, and I remember thinking a few short years ago, this guy needs to be in something Star Wars, and I got that, and they just gave the perfect role to him because he's got such a great voice to be, voicing a Jedi. So I'm
oh,
happy.
cool. Cool. Yeah, it is actually a pretty stacked voice cast, I have to say. And then of course we have one of my favorite cameos is Ember, the Charhound.
Yeah,
So Ember so Charhounds are from this planet called Elfrana, which is where Bell and Loden are stationed, where their Jedi outpost is. And so just the description from Wikipedia summarizes what charhounds are nicely. So, charhounds were small, four-legged creatures native to Elfrana. They were fast and could run long distances. They had high internal body temperatures, and the amount of heat they emanated varied across the creature's coloration. When provoked, they could shoot yellow flame from their mouth. The internal heat of the charhound's mouth was hot enough to burn or melt most materials, with only some materials, such as the crystals throughout Elfrana, being resistant to the heat. Even the charhound's urine was of a high enough temperature that it could light objects on fire.
Ooh.
Do you want a charhound pet?
I wouldn't mind one, actually. I really loved her a lot in the books that I've read with her. Just I guess the audiophile that I am, I like the barks that they're using in the show because to me they kind of match up
Oh,
with the sound effects that they're using in the audiobooks too. So they make her sound just as excited, just as enthusiastic as they do in the actual audiobooks. So that
yeah.
was pretty cool.
Yeah, as a pet, she would ruin your house, but they
Yeah.
but they are very social animals, it seems, or at least she is, and they are very like very protective of the people they love and friendly to others. Um, and yeah, it's a cute story in the books. Not to spoil anything, but since she shows up here, how she came into their lives is she showed up all hurt and injured, and they nursed her back to health, and we're like, oh,
Mhm.
you can stay.
Yeah.
And she shows back up in the finale too, without loaded. Sorry. We also got crossovers when they go to Starlight Beacon. We get Justine Lee as Lena So, who's a diplomat from the books, and we get Liam O'Brien as Estala Maru, a Jedi Master.
Also excited that he showed up in Young Jedi Adventures. He's one of my favorite voice actors from, Critical
Oh
Role
yeah.
fame and quite a few other
Hmm.
things.
Cool. Oh yeah. What did you think of the villains in this show?
I loved whenever the pirate gang showed up again and again. They just, I think, stole the show because they're such a diverse group of baddies.
Yeah, so they're led by Tabor, who's voiced by Trey Diaz Murphy, and his sidekicks Pord and EB3. And Pord is a girl. I don't know if they said that in the audio descriptions.
Yeah,
We just
it is. What, May 24th as we're recording this, and in one of the audio description tracks I was listening to yesterday, I found that out, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool."
yeah. I think it might be so it's subtle even if you can see her, but she just has like girlier eyelashes basically.
Ah, okay.
Um But so she's a Gamoran, and Gamorans, they're if you're gonna be nasty about it, they're called the pigs, but they're as green-skinned, pig-like humanoids that come from the planet of Gamor in the Outer Rim, and they're best known as guards to figures like Jabba the Hutt. So they have connections to the crime family. They are warlord type species with the clan structure, but this might be the first female Gamoran we've seen. I think, yeah, if there's a season 2, I really hope that we get a kid Hut in it.
Yeah, they really need to go there.
There is actually a kid Hut in Visions, but Jabba is nearly 400 at this point, so it won't be him. But there's a
Right.
lot of Huts on Nahata. And so the droid EB3 is a Cybots Galactica EB series overseer droid. So this droid is literally programmed to be the supervisor. And Bob, I had to laugh at I think you posted something about oh these are the Nile showing up here. They're not very good at it.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, the one episode where they did have dealings with a few Nihil. I didn't even know they were. I don't know if they failed to point that out. They definitely didn't mention them in the dialogue for the episode. Like
They
nobody said, "Oh, they're the Nile. They're the most devious group of pirates out there right now," or
yeah.
anything like that.
No, nobody
And
said that.
yeah, and of course the audio description track, they didn't cover it. Sometimes they'll cover information that the show doesn't even cover. I won't give away a little something in The Mandalorian, but they pointed out a certain character that didn't get named until a couple episodes later. But in this case,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't realize they were Nihil until someone on Twitter pointed that out to me after I'd seen the episode.
Well, I didn't realize it until you pointed it out. So, I mean, they just were basically like they're pirates, but then it's like, of course, they're the Nile. Of course
Sure,
they
yeah.
are. Yeah. And then we got a was it a one-off appearance from a Gungan character called Tuba Jinx? And Tuba Jinx was created for the Darth Jar Jar fans. So,
I think so too.
so Jar Jar Binks is a character we'll meet in the next phase. And for some reason, there's a lot of people, and I'm kind of one of them, who's like, wouldn't it be awesome if we had Darth Jar Jar? So so we got
If,
Tuba Jinx instead, who seems just a little bit squirrely and then complete betrayal.
if we ever do get a Star Wars Infinities TV show, the what if of Star Wars, they would be crazy not to do a Darth Jar Jar episode.
I mean, we have visions. Give us Darth Jar Jar.
There you go. Yeah.
And Tuba Jinx, that's tied up with one of a cameo that I got most excited about in terms of actor was Ace Callisto, who I heard the voice and immediately paused and looked it up. I'm like, yep, that's Tig Notaro. Tig Notaro is one of my favorite comedians. And yeah, we got a scoundrel character with a quick redemption arc and ties to Master Zia. So this isn't a villain, but on the creature side, we get, I guess, well, it must be our first on-screen sighting of exogorths, which are also known as space slugs. And these are silicon-based sentient species that reside in the hollows of asteroids. I have to share a theory that someone shared on Reddit, someone called Federal Friend 576, and it's titled "In the Star Wars Galaxy, There's Air in Space." And this is their thesis. Somehow in Star Wars, there is air in space. My evidence for this is as follows. There is sound in space, like laser blasts and explosions. Point taken. No one in Alpha Canon is ever seen wearing a spacesuit. In Beta Canon, like the X-Wings games, people do. A certain 3 characters survive inside a space slug despite no atmosphere. Another character survives being in space in the sequel trilogy. At one point, there's horses on the outside of a Star Destroyer, which is a type of ship.
Yep.
There's in Andor, there's characters who said to eject, even though someone didn't have a spacesuit. There's an episode in Star Wars Visions, which again is Legends, not canon, where 2 of the Jedi in space are without spacesuits and can breathe and talk no problem. Any questions? So, what do you think of this theory, Bob?
Oh, I'm fine with it, I guess. I mean, it's cool with or without air. I'm actually glad that there are laser blaster sounds in space, because back before we had audio description, I wouldn't have known what in the world was going on if you didn't have any audio whatsoever in
Yeah.
the big dogfight scenes. You just get the dialogue of the characters, and that would be it.
Yeah, so Star Wars is famous for, they just do things because they're cool on screen or whatever, and they might misuse a scientific word or something. So then they go back later and they're like, well, let's make it make sense. And so
Yeah.
there's a short story or a throwaway line in a movie or something that explains parsecs, or we'll talk about that parsecs later. But that explains, so there was a short story that explains when these 3 characters are inside the space slug, it's because the space slug, they take pride in maintaining a perfect atmosphere inside their bodies. But then I'm also wondering, like, the space slugs, I guess they can just breathe in space. And obviously the space whales, the Purgle also.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I'm cool. There's air in space. I agree with you, Federal Friend 576, on this topic at least.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
All right. So before we get into the actual plot of this as it exists, I had a conversation with my friend Hjalti, who is not only a professional animator, as I mentioned, but also the father of a young child. So I'm going to play that right after a quick break, and then Bob and I will be back to discuss the plots and other Easter eggs and things from the show. So see you on the other side. Okay, and I am here with Hjalti. Hjalti, thank you for joining. Lorehounds listeners might recognize you from the Oscar Prep series, but if you can introduce yourself just a little bit.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Hjalti. I'm an animation director at the Blender Studio in Amsterdam. So I've done animation for the last, I don't know. How old am I? It's at least 15 years. Let's say that. Let's cut it at that point.
And as listeners might be able to detect, you are also the parent of a young child who's not happy with bedtime.
He's getting new teeth and he's letting the world know.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
But so you are one of my more casual Star Wars fan friends. I think you've seen most of the movies and some of the TV shows.
Yeah, I think I've seen all of the films, and I have seen probably the majority of the TV shows.
Yeah, I think so.
But some of them I haven't seen all the way through, just because life got in the way, and I kind of never got around to it. Interestingly enough, I never grew up with Star Wars. I grew up in a small fishing village, and I'm born in '84, and the kids that were slightly older than me, maybe 4, 6 years older, they were into Star Wars and they had the toys and everything. And I was into Ninja Turtles and whatnot. So I had just never seen Star Wars. I had no idea what it was until I finally watched the first film in my mid-20s, maybe. I hit play, and it starts off with a scrolling text, and it says, Episode 4, and I hit pause because I thought I did something wrong. I didn't know. So since then I've seen all of the stuff for the most part.
Yeah. So I asked you if you wouldn't mind watching some of the Young Jedi Adventures. So did you get to watch the shorts and a few of the episodes?
Yeah, I saw all of the shorts, and then I was watching into some of the episodes. Unfortunately, I was kind of hoping that my 1-year-old would be into it, watching with me.
No,
he is more into Peppa the Pig and Bluey. Bluey is fantastic, so I don't mind watching that. I guess the color palette or something, he's just not quite there yet. So
it's interesting because actually John from the Lorehounds, who's going to be doing Acolyte coverage with me on this podcast, he said that similar about his daughter. She is slightly older, but she's more into the Bad Batch, which is like a really dark Star Wars cartoon, versus Young Jedi Adventures. She's like, nah.
Wow. How old is she?
I think she's 3.
Wow. Yeah, that's the level of sassiness I am preparing myself mentally for. Having very strong preferences.
Being raised by a professional storyteller and animator, so
exactly. Well, I know that I'm going to be quite the curator. I'll refuse to watch some things,
right,
and only guide him towards things that are a little bit higher quality level animation, perhaps. I don't want to be too snobby
it's
about it.
It's called snobbery, yeah.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so Young Jedi Adventures, it's no Bluey, not going to claim that. But what did you think of it overall?
I think it has charm. It has characters that have charm and what is. I mean, I'll just be frank. It's not for me at all.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not just that it's from my voice you might hear that I'm not a 3-year-old or 4-year-old or whatever. Yeah, exactly. But even then, they're in animation and in the animation industry. There's all types of animation, and and all of it is totally legitimate, and it's a market like anything else. So, there's stuff that is made by Pixar and Disney and whatnot, but there's also plenty of stuff from smaller studios where they have to make stuff for TV, and a lot of the times we kind of call it TV animation, and usually what that means is that it inherently will be lower quality, and it's just because it's on a more limited budget, which means that the animators they usually have a quota. So they have to do something like 20 seconds per week or even 30 seconds per week. Yeah. And there is just like, even if you're an amazing animator, it'll never reach the quality of Pixar when you're on that kind of a schedule.
Yeah. I mean, there are more like the Bad Batch that I mentioned, and by the end of the Clone Wars, and that are exceptional art, at least. I can't really speak to the technicalities of the animation. So,
yeah.
But I wonder, because those end up telling slightly more adult stories, and this is just very much pitched to preschoolers.
Oh, completely. Like it's doing very basic things about teaching kids about not being selfish and cooperation and friendship and all this stuff. Yeah. And maybe if I can talk a little bit about the connection with the Star Wars world, because it's not as if George Lucas in 1970 whatever sat down and was like, oh man, this is really the core of it. This is this is just it's a thing that you make that you kind of attach to a bigger world and whatnot. And as you do that, I was thinking like, okay, they I think they will want a villain. But I guess the villain has to be a child, because it's like they're all children.
Yeah. So they just him, right?
Yeah, so they just made a villain that is, that has a robot head or a helmet on. I guess it's a helmet.
It's a helmet. I'll say you do eventually get it taken off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen far enough, I guess, to actually see that. And it's like, okay, do you call them a Sith, or do you do that stuff? And no, like they went for a different label, which is pirate, which I had never heard of before in that world.
See, we gotta get you watching more Star Wars animation, because in the age that follows this, when the Clone Wars take place, pirates abound. But they also abound in this age because they're exploring the Outer Rim, and their communications aren't so great. So it's just prime pickings for pirates.
Is it let me, just so I understand, because the word pirate, you can use it in a very vague sense, which is like, it's just a random stranger that likes to steal stuff for their own gain. Or is it like a sect, or...
There are sects, and they do show up at one point. There's a big sect of marauders called the Nihil, but Tabor, the young pirate in this, is not part of that sect. He's well, it becomes actually, there's not much of an overarching plot in this show, because it really is, you get those two adventures of the week, and it's, as you say, little contained stories with a moral, but later in the second half, there are more serialized storytelling, including Tabor's story.
Okay, yeah. I'll just touch upon this. Okay, this is complete snobbery. The animation is good enough for what it needs to be for the target audience, I guess. That being said, like what ends up happening is that they basically allow the computer to do a lot of interpolation between poses, and it's one of my pet peeves. I just really dislike that, and it's inherently. It's kind of part of my profession, I guess.
So for people who don't know what that means, this is basically just using AI to smooth the motion. So it doesn't it's not like jerky or whatever, like we naturally are. It's a little too uncanny.
Yeah, okay. It's unnecessary to maybe go down an AI rabbit hole, but
okay. So but
it's just a basic interpolation. Any computer from the 90s can do that,
Right, because we actually have been using AI longer and more broadly than we realized.
Yeah,
It's not just about chatbots. Yeah.
Yeah, depends on the definition, I guess. It means that things are not as sharp or snappy as you would want. Things don't have as much intention. You know, you don't, instead of having the animator really craft every single frame, and it's 24 frames per second, or you animate on twos and then you're working with the equivalence of 12 frames per second. Instead, you're maybe only doing like one pose every, let's say, 16 frames or whatever, and then you're interpolating, you're allowing the computer to just fill in the blanks.
Right.
Exactly. And when it fills in the blanks, everything becomes a bit drifty, and arcs don't like, well, the arcs are so bad. And that's, I mean, it's just inherent in the whole thing, of course. That being said, I was surprised also. Okay, so I was surprised about a couple of things. So I'm never sure, of course, like what the studio is going to be like. You know, this studio that works on one of these things, are they big enough that they actually have a layout department or not? And you know, for something that is cheaper, sometimes the producers don't realize how important layout is, which is, you know, actually setting up the shots and making sure the camera work is working properly. And in a lot of cases, you just have producers that don't understand how crucial that is as part of the workflow. So they just offload that to the animators. But the animators aren't trained specifically for that. Like it's a different skill set. It has an overlap, of course, you know, a Venn diagram overlap. But so it basically meant that, like, as I was watching it, I was seeing decisions there that were not great, but also, like, how do I explain it? It could have been like, it would have taken zero effort to actually make it great or like better. And I'll give an example. So there were a lot of moments where a singular shot had a bit of an A and a B to it, right? So you create a composition where there's one character in the foreground and they're saying something, and you see there's another character in the backdrop, and this character in the foreground yells at this other person like, "Oh, we gotta get the hyperdrive going," or whatever, and then they kind of turn around, and the camera needs to now have the B side of that shot, which is it goes to the other character. Now, in real life, like meaning in live action filmmaking,
right,
the camera cannot physically just transport itself over there. It like the level of engineering that would be required, like it's like there's no way. So you would zoom, you would reposition the camera and zoom in on the other person.
Okay.
And they had these shots where that's what it seemed like they were going for, but instead they repositioned the camera and just pushed the camera in 3 dimensions at the other character. And in cinematography, like, it has this cheap feel to it because it immediately tells your brain that's not a real camera. That is 3-dimensional space, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so it kind of cheapens the cinematography all of a sudden, but with the same amount of effort. And you know, in some cases you can say it's a stylistic choice, but I think it was just a decision that was made probably because they didn't know any better, and then it was just a consistent decision that kept going all the way through. So anyway, so, you know, because when I watch it, I'm also thinking about, like, some of the really great cinematography in the actual Star Wars films.
No, I mean, and there is. Have you watched Visions, by the way?
No.
Okay, because actually I wanted to ask if you would be willing to come back and do an episode with Marcin and I to talk about Visions. Is an anthology series. It's Legends, and it's so it's not canon technically, but they do some of the most interesting stuff because each episode is a different story made by a different studio.
So it's
including
kind of an anthology thing. Kind
yeah,
of
it's totally
Love,
an
Death, and
anthology
Robots.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a collection of 5 episodes that are set during the heyday of the Sith. So, and Marchin's a real Sith aficionado. So,
Oh wow! I didn't know that. Okay, that
yeah.
explains so many things.
So, okay, I'm looking up the studio, and the series is produced by this series, Young Jedi Adventures, was produced by, of course, Lucasfilm Animation and Wild Canary Animation. So I don't know if you know.
Yeah, like I would bet everything that this
In
is a
Burbank.
that it's a vendor, like that it's
Mhm.
that they hired a small studio to and then put them on a strict budget and then of course that poor studio, they just have to
Yeah.
make do with
But
what they have.
I mean, I'm sure I haven't recorded the section where I talked to Bob about this yet, but I'm sure that he will bring up there is excellent voice acting.
The voice acting is fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it didn't like it is voice acting meant for very young
kids.
audience,
Yeah.
for kids. So
Yeah.
okay, so there's one thing that bothers me.
Okay.
And it has like 2 things that bothers me, Elysia. 2 things. I'm
Okay.
sorry. And I got reminded how much this bothers me as I was watching this series.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, they're wearing like the Jedi robes or whatever, or like the child version of that.
Mm-hmm. Do you notice? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Which is when, harking back to the original film, Obi-Wan Kenobi he's trying to lay low and make sure nobody knows that he's a Jedi Knight.
Right.
So he's just wearing like random robes because that's exactly not what a Jedi Knight would be wearing.
Right.
He's in hiding.
So this is more of an issue with the original film, or the way
the way they just like latched on to that his like particular clothing.
Okay, but that's not this show's film.
I know. I just got reminded by that. So as I was watching it, I was constantly thinking about it. It was like, okay.
But did you notice? Okay, wait. I'm going to ask you the second thing, but I want to ask first. Did you notice anything different about the way that they were dressed and the architecture? And did things look at all different to you versus other?
Yeah, eras? I mean, there seemed to be. It's stylized, of course, definitely.
Right. But I just mean the fact that this is actually set hundreds of years before the prequel trilogy.
That's
the High
what
Republic.
it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't think I had puzzled that together.
I don't know. I don't think they say like we are in the High Republic now.
Yeah, exactly. No, it just felt like
this is the Golden Age. Yeah.
But also like Yoda is there, but I guess Yoda is just so
But Yoda
old.
has a full head of hair.
I thought it was a toupee and it was just a stylistic choice or something. I don't know. I mean, that guy,
he's a couple hundred years younger.
Yeah, okay.
But he's still like 600 or so.
I mean, he still talks very slowly.
Mm-hmm. He's already 600,
Yeah.
The dude's been around. Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. So,
what was the second thing?
Yeah, sorry, the second thing. I got also reminded how much it bothers me how the lightsaber, just the concept of the lightsaber,
okay,
the way it's introduced in the original film, which is like this ancient, weapon that, seemingly like, as far as we understand, it really is just like a weird death laser sword that like in any direction, it's going to burn your skin. It's going to melt through.
Well, that's why having the Force helps you to wield it. Yeah.
Exactly. But then it really feels like, okay, that probably means that like you would give like somebody graduating as a Jedi Knight would like, have the full-fledged version of that thing.
Oh, you mean that the kids had lightsabers?
Yeah, the kids had it, and all I can think of is and they are so not careful with it. They're just, and also in the series, in order to create situations, they are clumsy. Accidents happen, blah blah blah, and they are full on with their lightsaber as they are dropping things and being clumsy and still trying to figure out how to use the Force. And I just think, oh boy, that's dangerous.
I mean, so one of the things is that they started to train the kids and turn them into child soldiers at a younger age during this era to fight those Nihil that I talked about, the Marauders. But this is also why they do, even later, they take the kids as small children from their parents. Like there's a dark backstory going on with all these kids in this show. The fact that they are ripped from their homes and sent to this, random outer rim planet Tanu to train and become child soldiers. And we'll see on this podcast later in a much later era, actually, in Ahsoka. So that's what, era 7, I think. You get to see a scene where a character who's older than this, but still only like 14, is in the midst of battle in live action. And that really sends it home. Like, these are child soldiers.
Wow. So with that, I mean, I will say the series I just watched, they dress it up as a very family friendly, happy go time, kind of a thing.
Can I tell you something about, I don't think you got this far, but in the latter half, they visit Starlight Beacon several times, and that ends up getting blown up and a lot of people die.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
So I'm very worried for these kids.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, yeah, it definitely didn't look like it was a world with a lot of stakes, to be honest. I mean, that's, when you have something that's super child friendly, of course, you kind of lower the stakes, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We're expecting a second season of this, but I can't imagine it goes much further because you can't have, are you going to have the fallout of the destruction of Starlight Beacon?
Ah, I see. Yeah, I mean, how long before that event happens is this set?
Like very closely before.
Oh, okay. So they can't like milk. I mean, maybe it's like Simpsons or something where they just keep going and going and going, and
it never passes forward in time.
Yeah, this character is just 8 years old forever or whatever.
Yeah. Well, they do have crossover characters from the books that show up in the show too.
Ah, okay. Well, the books are no longer canon, right? That's
sorry.
official.
I mean crossover. No, because there's a new multimedia project called the High Republic, which is set during this time, and that is all canon.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so we've got all the stuff that we're covering on the podcast now is set during this new era, quote unquote. I mean, it's not that new, but called the High Republic, which is being filled in with new stories. Like the Acolyte is set at the end of it, the TV show coming out on June 5th. But did you have any favorite characters from what you saw?
No. I'm sorry.
not a one of them charmed you.
I mean, I think they're like, it's funny because with each one of them, I can see what they are trying to, like, I can feel the writers and I can feel how, like, oh, we got to have a rogue pilot that, is not Force sensitive, but is like, is like the equivalent of Han Solo. And then we got to have, and, as it goes along, they feel like little miniature copy pastes of something familiar that is more charming to me.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So
okay.
Yeah. And unfortunately any attempt of humor like just falls flat with me because of course it's not meant for me. So
it's not meant for you.
So whenever it's trying to be humorous, I'm just like watching it.
I should have had you just watch some random episodes from the end. I swear they are better in the second half of the season, but like I said, I'm not going to claim this is any sort of Bluey. I'm not going to claim that this is the best Star Wars animated series because I mean, it's the one that I like the least, but of course it is because it's meant for 4-year-olds.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's no escaping it. I mean, and when you're somebody in the industry, like animation industry, it's even harder watching, like with my nephew when he was young and he liked to watch Paw Patrol. And I would be watching it with him. And I just like at some point I just had to stop watching because all I can see is stuff that I would want to give notes on. Like I'm mentally writing notes to give to the animators to be like, ooh, I see some knee popping here for the IK feet and this and this and this. And so
professional drawbacks. Yeah,
exactly. It's difficult.
Well, so which format did you like better? The short format or the double mini episode format?
The short.
Yeah, I thought that worked better too. Although, like I said, toward the end of the season, the longer format really won me over. But the short format felt perfect for that, attention span at that age.
Yeah, it was a bit confusing, the double episode format, because it just
they weren't related, or
it looked like the episode was over and then we're kind of still in it, and then a totally different thing happens. So I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't just have it split into 2 episodes.
I don't know, maybe 50 episodes is too intimidating. Yeah, but I thought the same thing.
Could be. I mean, Bluey has like 50 episodes per season.
Yeah, that's true. But they're all like 6 minutes, right?
Okay, that's fair.
So I guess you're not going to continue, and you wouldn't recommend it to anyone?
I mean, anyone that I could recommend it to are not listening to this. They're like 2 years old.
Right.
No, but like so here's the thing, like.
But to parents of 2-year-olds.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you would have to be the kind of parent that is fanatical about Star Wars and want to immerse your child in Star Wars.
Okay.
In any way possible, just in the hopes that they are gonna like get bitten by the bug, just enough to actually then hang on until you can give them quality, I guess.
I mean, but like, come on, there must be worse general cartoons for preschoolers out there.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, no, don't get me wrong. Like, there's definitely is.
I do. I personally prefer this to Peppa the Pig as an adult.
How dare you?
I know. But it's because I love Star Wars, so of course I prefer this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's fair. I will say, like with something like Peppa the Pig, for example, it's not trying to punch above its weight, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It takes on an art style, and then it actually sticks the landing with that art style. Like, it's the animation is actually quite good in Peppa the Pig, because it like fits perfectly with that art style. But with this series, I constantly had the feeling that they were aiming way higher than what they could afford in the actual animation.
Okay.
And the lip syncing, unfortunately,
was off.
Hit and miss, very hit and miss. Okay. Unfortunately, I came here to chew bubblegum and tear this show apart. No, I'm sorry. Like, it has its audience, and I'm sure a lot of kids will.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, to be honest, I don't know. I can't say that any kids have recommended it, but adults are like, who are really into Star Wars and want the full story, are like, oh, it's cute. It's really cute. And there's nubs. D. Bradley Baker is nubs.
Well, I always contend that the best preschool TV shows are the ones that the parent can also watch with them.
Right.
And it doesn't mean they have to like put in adult humor or whatever necessarily or anything like that. But it's enough to like engage you and feel like you are sitting with them and enjoying it together. And I actually, when I'm watching Peppa the Pig, with my 1-year-old, there are jokes that I will laugh out loud because it came out of nowhere. And partially it's because, you're watching, and your expectations are set to a certain level. And then all of a sudden you just have a moment that feels like something out of a Pixar film or whatever. It's like they have really good jokes sprinkled in here and there. I'm trying to defend Peppa the Pig for some reason.
I mean, I used to do a lot of work doing copy for Peppa the Pig, so maybe that's also has to do with it.
Well, there will be a moment where my son will call me Daddy.
Daddy. So on the adult side of things, are you planning to watch The Acolyte?
Wouldn't mind giving it a chance. Yes. I will say, as of right now, anyone listening that has a 1-year-old, like,
they know.
they know that your time
Yeah.
is any free time is very limited. So you have to be very careful about what you choose to consume on a
Mhm.
media level. And at this point, I don't I've been a podcast junkie, for example, since 2006,
Right.
and this year, I found myself a few weeks ago realizing that I had just stopped listening to podcasts.
Altogether.
Yeah, altogether. And I just have a backlog that is so long now of all these amazing episodes. And I have no time in my life all of a sudden to do it. And, I'm looking forward to when maybe the little guy gets slightly more independent and I can dive
Right.
into all the stuff. But that's why I'm
Preschool.
saying, regarding a lot of the stuff on Disney Plus and whatnot, the Star Wars
Mhm.
stuff, there's so much stuff now. They've really geared it up. So you really have to be picky now.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of content, and I do think that we're going to see a general slowing down of content. I know Bob Iger said that about that's going to be taking place across Disney, but I think it's going to be taking place across all platforms.
Yeah, it seems like also in order to get more content, Disney, put some pressure on Pixar to also make stuff, and they made stuff. They
Right.
made some spin-off and whatnot from some of their films and
But it hasn't been
shorts.
it hasn't been their greatest hits
No,
recently.
no, not necessarily. I mean, some of it has charm, definitely. I really
Mhm.
like the Forky episodes. They were fantastic. But yeah, I saw the announcement. I think it was this morning or yesterday that there's going to be layoffs now at Pixar.
Oh.
14% of the
Mm.
people are going to get fired, and
Oh
I think
no.
and I think it's a byproduct of this phase that Disney, kind of entered with. Oh, we have to put more stuff on Disney Plus. We got to make more stuff. So they
Mhm.
probably hired a lot of
Right.
extra personnel because of that, and then they're
Now
kind
they're
of
letting them go.
stripping back down.
Yeah, I know there's some union contracts that are up for negotiation at the end of the year too, so it might continue to be a volatile time on the business side of the entertainment industry.
Yeah, it's sad. I mean,
Yeah.
we all knew that as the streaming wars were happening,
Mhm.
and Disney, is part of that. Of course, it was un, um,
Inevitable.
thank you, inevitable. It was inevitable that there would be an insane amount of content
Mhm.
produced in the span of a couple of years or whatnot, and then eventually it's going to start, dying down. There's no way
Mhm.
you can maintain this amount of content.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I have no idea who won. What happened? Did Disney win, or
win against what?
I don't know. This thing called the streaming wars.
Oh, did they? I mean, at the moment, it seems very arbitrary when they decide who's doing well and who isn't. But I think there's criticism about Disney that Bob Iger is reacting to at the moment.
Oh, great. All right,
Yeah.
fair enough.
But they said, well, actually, they haven't promised a second season of this show. So I don't know. It seems like, despite what you heard here today, that the show is largely getting positive reviews. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if there's a second season. And if there's a second season, then I will definitely jump back to this part of the timeline and add an episode talking about it when it's over. But Hjalti, thank you so much for sharing your time with me and to talk about this show that you and
Thank you,
for taking
Elysia.
the time to watch some of it as well.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much, Elysia.
And yeah, looking forward to talking about Sith animation that I think you're going to be much more enthusiastic about next time.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, and Bob and I are back. So, Bob, you haven't been able to listen to that interview yet, but spoiler, Hjalti was not a huge fan of the show. Are you surprised?
Um, if he's professional animator, that would make sense. I'm sure there are some valid reasons for that. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, part of it is complaints about the animation, and indeed he's a professional animator. Even I could see the animation was done on the cheap, but I think you and most people listening honestly won't notice or care about the level of animation.
it's fascinating to get into that side of Star Wars. So it's definitely something that future me, when this podcast comes out, is going to be listening to.
Yeah. What I should have pointed out to him, but I didn't realize until later, is apparently in December of 2023, Young Jedi Adventures won 2 Emmy Awards for outstanding editing for a preschool animated program, and outstanding sound mixing and sound editing for a preschool animated program. So, and it was nominated for 3 other Emmys: outstanding preschool animated series, outstanding music direction and composition for an animated program, and outstanding main title. So it's definitely, the show has got its love out there amongst the critics. But it struck out with 2 kids. It struck out with Hjalti's son, who's granted 1-year-old, a bit too young. But as I mentioned in that interview, it also struck out with John from the Lorehound's daughter, who is the right age. So
Yeah.
um, it's interesting. Everyone seems to comment on how brightly colored the show is, and some kids who have parents who like darker shows seem to already be preferring, like John said his daughter prefers the Bad Batch to this show. Do you think the Bad Batch is a kid show?
I think it probably could be, depending on what you want your kids to watch. I mean, it doesn't really seem too crazy dark. But that's a good question, though.
That's a show that we'll be talking about in the 5th era.
Yeah.
It's got great animation, as I said. And yeah, I think also the show, so Hjalti also only watched the beginning of it and decided not to continue. And as we keep saying, the back half's stronger.
Mhm.
And it's especially in the front half. Front half, it's very episodic. So the story does get deeper as you start revisiting characters and locations. And yeah, I think it led to a surprisingly good and satisfying finale.
Oh, so do I.
All right, well, let's get into the actual plot. So, season 3 opens with the 3 younglings at the Jedi Temple in Coruscant being sent to the Jedi outpost in Tanu to train. Bob, why do you think these 3 were sent? Do you think their personalities and interests played a role?
That seems to make the most sense to me. Yeah. That's actually, I think, sums up why they were chosen. I feel like Yoda, for him to take a personal interest in these 3 and send them to Tanu, I don't know. I feel like he's got something going on that we don't quite know about yet. I'm not sure what that is, but it's interesting that he's done this here in Young Jedi Adventures, and later on, I think he actually does something a bit similar in terms of picking a specific Padawan to do a little something in another animated show later on. I don't know.
Mm,
Yoda's got interesting reasons for doing what he does. That
he has his
you know,
favorites, yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I also liked the introduction to them as Master Z is trying to gather everyone up for, the trip to go to Tanu, and she's immediately like, "Oh, I already know which 3 are missing."
yeah,
So we know they're the good bad kids,
right,
because they're missing, not because they're doing bad things. They're missing because they're training too hard.
yes.
But yeah, so throughout the season, they visit many places, learn many lessons along the way. And then in the finale, we learn that a character they befriended on one planet. So they went to this planet called Vundala, and there was an earthquake there, and the king and queen had no interest in helping the people rebuild. They're only interested in rebuilding their own private stuff. And there's a prince there, their child, Cyrus Vundir, and they convince him to help the local people, convince him to convince his parents basically to give them supplies to rebuild. And I have to say, the town, they're like, this town looks terrible. I'm like, that's just like a normal buildings with a couple cracks here and there, but sure, okay.
I wish the audio description track had pointed that out.
Yeah, they're like, it's barely broken. No.
Yeah.
But I get the idea. It's supposed to be a wreck.
Yeah.
So yeah, Prince Cyrus, he befriends the Jedi and he helps, the local people. And then we find out in the finale that Prince Cyrus was Tabor Valdorn all along.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's been the petty pirate. Why do you think he does that?
I feel like his parents just don't give him the time of day. He is, I think, desperate to feel like he's a part of that family. And these two, they just can't be bothered with anything but themselves and their image, their public image. And he just feels, I feel like, left out. He doesn't feel loved, so he's seeking attention elsewhere if he can get it, because it's obvious that he's not getting that at home. So
Yeah.
he hangs out with his pirate buddies more than he hangs out with his parents. He probably feels more kinship to them than his parents, because they seem like they had him, but after they had him, it's like, well, just go do whatever. We've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
We feed you, we clothe you, but that's about all we're going to do with you, darling.
Yeah. We see that he seems to have an authoritative streak, because even when he's the prince, he wants to just order people around and say, well, because I'm the prince, that's why. But I do notice with his buddies, they don't know his true identity, so he can be somebody completely different, which I think makes him feel more powerful.
Yeah, and if they did lay a clue as to who he was in that previous episode, I guess I missed it. But now that I think about it,
No.
Tabor with his helmet on, he usually says, well, I do what I want. Then there is, I think, more than one instance in the Prince episode, the first episode, we actually see him, unbeknownst to us, behind the mask. He says, well, I'm the prince. I can do whatever I want. So I guess I should have picked up on that.
Yeah, I think it was really well done, really well seated, that twist.
Yeah.
And we also see, as the season goes on, it starts to seem like his crew likes hanging out with the Jedi more than him, because the Jedi are nice to them.
Yeah, exactly. And as the season goes on too, he seems like he's softening a bit toward them.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when he hears in the finale that they are saying, well, because in the finale, he steals the dedication plaque for Starlight Beacon. And the Jedi are more concerned with getting their friend Cyrus back, because they assume, Cyrus is also gone. So they don't realize he's in the mask, obviously. So they think that Tabor has kidnapped him. And they're more concerned with getting Cyrus back than the plaque. And I think for him, that's a real turning point. And he ends up, they get to keep the plaque. And he says, I'll give you Cyrus back if you let me go. So that at one point, he was going to take off his helmet and reveal himself to them.
Yeah.
But then something happened. So he decides not to reveal himself yet. And he tells his crew, like, release Prince Cyrus. And they're like, we don't know who Prince Cyrus is. Just go along with it. Okay. And so he comes back out, and he knows that they genuinely see him as a friend, and he's probably never had that before. If there's a season 2, what do you think will happen with Tabor next?
I wonder if, at some point, which I really hope to see in season 1, I kind of imagine him at some point possibly meeting Marchion Ro and kind of getting involved with the Nihil a little bit. That's probably a bit too dark for this show. Not that we would have to see a lot of dark stuff. That would have been so interesting if Tabor had actually met some of the top Nihil, especially the EIII, and tried to get involved with them just a little bit. But who knows, if there is a season 2, we might see that. And I loved how the finale ends with Yoda kind of taking the prince aside and being like, much conflict I sense in you. And so Yoda knows that there is something about this kid that probably needs to bear watching. And because if anybody could pick up on that, Yoda can, and he definitely senses something. And if
Right.
Yoda senses something, I wonder if it's going to be pretty big later on.
Yeah. I feel like this being a kid show, he's going to end up on the side of the light tape,
Oh, sure.
Cyrus tape, or whatever we want to call him. But yeah, season 2 is a maybe for the show. Like there's been some discussion, but no green light.
Mhm.
But I have to ask, how long can they keep this story going before it gets too dark for preschoolers? So,
Yeah.
I mean, because this is not long before the fall of Starlight Beacon, and also when the Jedi are recalled from the Outer Rim, and anyone who stays behind gets trapped behind the storm wall. So it's one thing to say, that's it's one thing to ignore a certain character's absence and just, like, don't worry about that. It's another thing to make a big deal about this satellite, and then you can't ignore that it falls. You can't ignore that the kids are retracted from Tanu.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone who's not sure what we're talking about now with this stuff, I recommend you listen to the High Republic overview episode.
Mhm.
I have to point out one other thing for the finale. Another classic Star Wars trope they had to throw in is they get caught in a trash compactor.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there are some important locations that they visit throughout the show. One, of course, we keep referring to is Starlight Beacon. I was pleasantly surprised how much it was brought up, and it played such an important role in the finale. You?
Yeah. I really liked all of the High Republic references that showed up in animation. I was not expecting Starlight Beacon or the Jedi that we actually got to see crossing over into this either. So,
Right, like Bell and Loden, yeah.
and
Um,
yeah, that's what kept me watching because I really wanted to see who might show up and who might voice them and what locations from the books that we might see.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we also got Lena So, the diplomat. And so she says, this station will be a symbol of the Republic in the Outer Rim, a place where we will celebrate our union and help each other to make it grow. It will send out a signal for anyone in this sector to hear at any time, the beacon of the Republic, the sound of hope. Do, 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 do. So someone named Scout the Trooper on Reddit tried to estimate the size of Starlight Beacon, and I won't go into all the detail that they went into, but very impressive, like comparing references and the size of the tower and things like that. But they decided it's 1.5 times the size of a Star Destroyer, which we haven't really talked about Star Destroyers. So ships that show up later in the timeline, but they're like these giant, massive. When you see giant, massive triangular ships hovering over a planet, that's probably a Star Destroyer.
Yes.
But yeah, touching on something that Hjalti and I talked about in our conversation, he said he was so surprised to see kids that young using lightsabers. Were you?
Um, I think it did cross my mind for a few seconds. I was just so used to things that I read about as a much younger Star Wars fan in the old EU timeline. So, whenever you see, these kiddos using sabers, I don't know, it just really didn't stand out to me that much. I just think Jedi, lightsabers, younglings. Yeah, okay.
I mean, I was a little bit at first, but it also makes sense because one of the things they're not going to talk about directly in this show, but we've talked about previously in the High Republic overview episode, is the Guardian protocols.
Sure.
And so the Guardian protocols, they actually come up after Starlight Beacon's destruction. So right after this. But and this is when they start training younglings even younger, so even younger than this, I guess.
Wow.
And yeah, then all outposts are to be staffed by droids, and yeah, combat instruction of younglings is accelerated with earlier Padawan trials, and no Jedi travels alone. All independent research is to be suspended with offensive tactics being approved when required, and lightsabers are made more simplistically than they were, earlier in the High Republic. So they're getting closer to what we see in the prequel trilogy. if they're already training at this young age. And then they enact shortly after this the Guardian protocols. There's gonna be babies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they also visit the planet of Batu twice, which we brought up in the last episode. This Batu was a bustling outpost in the age of exploration, but it devolves into an out-of-the-way haven for criminals once the hyperlanes are mapped out to bypass it. The biggest settlement there is called Black Spire Outpost, and that is the location of the Star Wars land, basically in Disney theme parks, and also the location in the Galaxy's Edge VR game. And the spires, they're petrified remains of ancient trees. And actually, Batu means rock in Malay, the language of Malaysia. But Batu also has jungles and oceans, which I didn't realize from looking at it in the show.
Yeah, that's a planet I'm not familiar with, since I don't really keep up with the Star Wars land stuff. I probably should. I'm definitely going to go back and watch the cutscenes to that VR game, because I keep forgetting that exists. And I liked what we got to see in the show and what I've read about it online, of course. So it's something I definitely want to get into more.
You were very indignant about the con man who was going to cut down those spires.
Yeah. He was such an interesting character, because he's not even trying to hide his villainy. I think I wrote on Twitter that he's kind of half-assedly doing it, and he's just not even hiding his evilness. Like, I'm just going to release my bus droids and just have a fun time breaking things and making money. Why not? Kind of reminded me of an interesting Star Warsy version of Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. Burns doesn't hide how evil he is, and this guy it reminds me a lot of Mr. Burns plus Lyle Lanley, the guy that was trying to sell Springfield the monorail at one point.
Right.
They know they're sleazoids. Yeah, they know they're sleazoids, and they're not hiding it.
What did you say? Something like it was just too much effort for. He was like, it's too much effort to keep up the pretense. Release the droids.
Yeah, being congenial is hard.
Yeah. But I can't believe that it still hurt me that he cut one of the spires in Black Spire Outpost. That was like a minor character dying.
Yeah.
But we also visit another planet that we see elsewhere called Braca, which is a junker planet. And I'm always Leo pointing meme at it whenever we see it, because you do visit it in the Bad Batch. We spend a little bit of time there in the Bad Batch, actually, but players of Jedi Fallen Order know it as the place where you start the game. So it's just basically, I have to bring up Beacon 23 again, because they also had junker characters who, it's basically where they just take out of commission ships and break them down for parts. And people just make their living there on the ground doing that. One of my favorite a new location they invented was Kondoran, which is where they went sky skimming on the broadleaf trees.
Yeah, I love that location as well.
And we meet there a Nautolan they are like amphibious creatures they have like instead of two Leku, like the Twi'leks, they have a bunch of different, I don't think they're called Leku, but it almost looks like dreadlocks, like as sort of tentacles from their heads. But they look really cool. They're always like, this guy's very much the sky skimming is very much like surfing. And even when he's teaching them, they have to be patient, and learning surfing's annoying because you have to learn how to stand on the board first, which takes forever.
Right.
But yeah, I thought he was cool. But maybe I just like Nautolans because I like Kit Fisto, who we'll meet later.
Yeah, Kit is one of my favorite Jedi of all time. So it's awesome that we get to see one of his species in Young Jedi Adventures. And that is one of the characters voiced by Sam Riegel, our 2K3 Donatello. And he's also of Critical Role fame. So.
Okay. Oh, good. We have you here to point that out, because I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Does Kit Fistos count as a Glup Shido character?
I don't know. He seems like a character that I've read about for so long, both in this timeline and the old one. He just feels like a regular to me. I wish I could give a definitive answer to that. Some of these guys I've just read about and watched for so long that I'm like, oh yeah, he's a
So,
regular.
okay, so Rix Togano is a Glupshido character for sure.
Yeah.
But how would you define a Glupshido character for people who don't know what that means?
I feel like those are characters that might just be, possibly sitting in a cantina, not really having any dialogue, just kind of there to fill seats in bars, possibly. Um, there's a certain character in one of the trilogy movies. I don't feel like it's a spoiler to say that he's running around with something that looks like an ice cream maker. I would say he's probably a Glupshido character, although they have devoted, quite a bit of lore to this particular character over time. So I don't know if that depends on your point of view, a certain point of view, or not.
Yeah. I mean, so this term was invented by some random smartass on Twitter, I think it was a few years ago, who's just like making fun of, all the many little random Star Wars characters and their weird names, and came up with this, and the entire internet just latched on. They're like, yes, we love Glupshido characters.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about the Star Wars community is like the smallest character that appears in the back of a scene, somebody loves that character and has done like obsessive study on everywhere that they've shown up and knows their entire life story. And Star Wars has all these details that you can get into if you want to, but you don't have
Yeah.
to.
There were action figures upon action figures of Glupshidos back in the day. I wish we still got those various aliens and ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, I wonder why they do fewer action figures these days.
I know that kind of makes me think of Young Jedi Adventures, because I believe they have a toy line, or did at one point. You could get the Firehawk, and I think they were showing off the Temple on Tanu, the playset and stuff like that. I never bothered with those, because those were pretty kiddie, and they're
Yeah.
probably not to scale with the stuff I collect anyway. But I thought, oh, that's interesting that they released that when it comes to toys, because Star Wars is doing less and less toys these days, it feels like. So it was awesome that they did release a line for the kiddos that watch the show.
Yeah. No, good. I'm glad, because this is kind of prime for it.
Yeah. And the vintage collection junkie in me is like, okay, now we need a 3 or 4 pack of the kids and possibly Tabor and a couple other characters from this line.
Yeah, it's not really a Young Jedi Adventures character, but I definitely need an Ember thing. And I also they had a Tuca kitten in this. So Tuca kittens, or otherwise known as Adoris felinus, felinus, there's a subspecies known as loth cats. So some people might know loth cats better, but they are basically cat-like creatures that have chicken feet and kind of have like a big Cheshire cat smile and like these solid ears that don't indent, but they're super, super cute. And they need to merchandise that more. They do merchandise them a bit, but I feel like this should be as big as Baby Grogu.
Yeah, I think so too. I feel like they should certainly put out a heck of a lot more High Republic merch than they have, because there are so many new characters, in this show and, in all of the books and the comics. And for them, for Hasbro not to make toys, that's crazy. I feel like they could be bringing in a whole lot, but we just don't get a lot of that anymore, because kids tend to rely on their iPhones for games and to be entertained. So, that's just the way it is, I guess. But I would imagine that they would probably do some Funko Pops of all this stuff. That seems to be.
Sure. No, there definitely is merchandise, but I think, how cool would it be if they had like robot nubs, life-size robot nubs? They're very expensive, but
cool. Like an interactive nubs that could just walk around your room, or yeah, I think that would sell very well.
Oh, so it's funny about the Tucas is that, so they were originally from Legends in this role-playing game, this other space role-playing game. And then they were introduced into canon in the Clone Wars. You hear us mentioning the Clone Wars a lot, because it is like kind of the beating heart of Star Wars sometimes. But it was actually, they were actually first introduced as a stuffed toy and then later as in the TV show. Interesting. And they're named after Dave Filoni's deceased cat, Took. Oh. So speaking of nostalgia, there's one musical theme that they use regularly in the show, which is Binary Sunset, which was originally written by John Williams for the first Star Wars movie, referring to the planet of Tatooine has two suns, so it has a binary sunset. But it's mostly called the Force theme, and you guys listen to it every time you listen to this podcast because that is the theme of this podcast. So the version we use is an electric violin cover by Joanna Haltman, and you can find the link in the show notes to the full song in every episode. But I always get excited when that song shows up.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite themes from Star Wars.
And it often, when you hear it, it often signifies that a character might be force sensitive. So we hear it applied with the Jedi in this show a lot. And that's why people call it the Force theme now.
Yeah.
Although I liked in episode 13, at one point, Nash is, they're going to do this meditation thing that they think will help the spot of trouble that they've gotten into this time. And Nash, who's not a Jedi, the pilot, she says, like, well, I'm not a Jedi, so I can't really help. And the Jedi say to her, it's okay. All living things are connected by the Force. So I just think it's interesting that they're again bringing in this theme we've been hearing more and more in modern Star Wars that, everyone can touch the Force in some way, even if not all are naturally apt in the same way.
Yeah. I mean, Yoda himself says at one point in the timeline that it surrounds us and binds us. So it does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like you loved that we got I saw your comment about getting back-to-back holiday specials on here.
Yeah. One of my favorite locations in both timelines is Kashyyyk. The first time
Yeah.
I'd read about it was in Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire. That was my first exposure to the planet. I mean, I know there were some people that were there in the 70s when the holiday special, actual live action holiday special premiered, and that was their first time actually getting to see it on screen. But Kashyyyk is always going to have a special place in my heart because it seems like such a fascinating planet to visit when it comes to Wookiees. I don't know how they make it look in animation or live action. I just imagine a bunch of trees with platforms connecting them. That's the way that they described it in the EIII timeline back in the day. I don't know if it looks that way in the current timeline or not. That's certainly how I pictured it, though.
Yeah, no,
head.
that's absolutely how it looks. And it's kind of a jungly type planet on the grounds, which I mostly know. Yeah, which I mostly know from it's a location that you explore in the Jedi Fallen Order game, and it's sort of like it's like the jungle version of Australia, where everything's trying to kill you.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, back in the old timeline, that's where Wookiees would go to, perform their rite of passage and, come into adulthood. So I think it's really awesome that they keep the dangerous jungle, underworld to that planet.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the Wookiees, their biggest holiday of the year is Life Day, which we see in an episode on here, and it's celebrated around our winter solstice in the Northern Hemisphere terms in our world. And Life Day was a holiday that celebrated, just like family and harmony and just all of the good values of Wookiee culture. And they have it at the Tree of Life, which is like this just massive tree that you actually climb in Jedi Fallen Order. And it's where you can live on and around it. It's just so massive. And they have, like we see in this episode, they have these ornaments, these orbs that they hang on the tree that represent their family and all the good values. And there's, feasting and lights and music. And later when people leave this planet, this holiday gets more widespread. And this is one of the one of the many pieces of the Star Wars holiday special from the 70s that was pulled into canon. So yeah, we're definitely going to, even though it's Legends and even though it's notoriously bad, we're going to watch the Star Wars holiday special together in Era 5 and like it. Okay.
Yep.
You have to watch it at least once in your life.
I watch it every year. It's the Riff Tracks version because it's the only way I'm able to know what's going on. They're never going to make audio description for that. So you have Mike Nelson, Bill Corbett, and Kevin Murphy of Mystery Science Theater fame sitting down and
nice.
watching that. So that's how I'm able to tell what's going on in that. Plus, you get all the commercials too from the 70s.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, so it's obviously like a Christmas reference, especially where it's timed. It's got the pagan elements too. But there's also new holidays introduced. Like we get in this show, we get Dunkutu Day on the planet Omaka, which is, and it gives a nod to Thanksgiving. They're harvesting gum gourds and then having a big feast together. That was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Is there anything else from this season that you think that we should mention that the people must know about?
Man, I wish I could think of other things. It's
Okay.
probably gonna happen like after we wrap.
Yeah.
That's how it always happens in these episodes. I'm like, oh yeah, I should have mentioned that after the fact.
No, exactly. Well, obviously, if anything else from this show becomes like an Easter egg in anything we watch after this, we will for sure point it out.
Definitely.
But yeah, if you're curious, you'll find it on Disney Plus.
Oh,
And
I forgot to mention in our Force Cave episode, I like that Kai Brightstar actually had a little brush with the dark side of the Force when he was experiencing his Force vision, because the dark side sneakily, I think, represented Tabor and was tempting him to take the quick and easy path. Just take what you want. Being a Jedi, trying to be perfect is you can't do that. Just take the easy path. Take what you want. Be whoever you want to be. Do what I'm doing. And that was such an interesting moment in Star Wars for Kai Brightstar. It certainly reminded me of a certain scene from some movies we'll be talking about at some point.
Yeah, so I do wonder in some way if they might be setting up something where these were, reluctant frenemies as children who become enemies as adults.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
what I was wondering too.
Or Tabor has full redemption arc. Which would you
Yeah,
prefer?
I would love to see him kind of be redeemed just because they really got me liking him as the show progressed. And the Jedi started bringing out the best in him, I think. And I'd love to see him eventually get to where he's possibly fighting alongside them as an adult, maybe realizing that he can be a better ruler than his parents were. And, he's going to have to reach down into the, deepest parts of himself and possibly be better than that. But who knows what they're going to do with his character.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope there's a season 2 actually. I'm into it. I want there to be more of this story, but I also hope that I love these characters and I hope that they do end up, they were invented for this show, but I want them to be in other things now too.
Right. So do I.
All right. Well, if there is a season 2, obviously we will, at the end of that season, we will jump back to this point in the timeline and give you a summary episode just like this one. But for now, for people who are listening live, we've got one more prep episode coming your way this week before the Acolyte is released. And so that episode's going to be a preview of everything we know going into the Acolyte. So the setting, the characters, including a deeper dive into Vanessa Rowe, as we keep saying, in her light whip, and also which Star Wars faves are around at this point in the timeline who could pop up in the show. And we'll also be revisiting this part of the timeline in the coming year as well, with coverage of the High Republic's books phase by phase. So this episode will eventually fall between the High Republic's phases 2 and 1 in that order. And if you're listening at the time of publishing, then you'll have weekly Acolyte recaps to look forward to, where I'll be joined by John from the Lorehounds. And Bob and I will check back with some mailbag episodes in the near future, too. So if you have any feedback about anything we've covered so far or anything to come, like whether we missed your favorite character or you want to make sure we don't miss your favorite character in the future, please send all your thoughts to swtimelinepodcast@gmail.com, and you'll find that link in the show notes. So thank you to Jedi Bob for exploring the cutest corner of Star Wars history with me. Check out his YouTube channel. You'll find that link in the show notes as well. And you can also find us both on Twitter. Any final thoughts, Bob?
I had a really good time with this show. That's about all I know. It was certainly a welcome addition to my Star Wars exploration. So
yeah, we want to hear if other people watched, if they had a good time with it as well, or if people might have felt closer to what Hjalti felt, which, as he also mentioned, he is a young baby, has little time to watch things. So maybe if you don't have much time to watch things, maybe this isn't the first thing I'm recommending. But if you're like, I want to see all the Star Wars things, then this is a good time.
Yeah.
So this episode was produced by me, published by the Lorehounds. If you can really help us out, especially since this is a brand new podcast, by sharing this with anyone else you think wants the intel on all the Star Wars lore. And you can also help us out by leaving a nice review anywhere you happen to be listening. The algorithm does really like it when you give 5 stars. They punish us for less. It's unfair. And of course, there's on the Lorehounds main feed, there's currently weekly Doctor Who coverage going on, upcoming Furiosa coverage, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Also, the guys are covering House of the Dragon, and with Marilyn, they're covering Rings of Power. And also check out the affiliates. So I have a podcast, Will Shift Dust, where we're currently covering season 2 of the sci-fi space show Beacon 23. And Radioactive Ramblings is currently covering season 2 of Invincible and a deep dive into Fallout lore. And Rings and Rituals, they're wrapping up their recap of season 1 of Rings of Power. And Properly Howard is wrapping up their season of Felonies and Fugazis, with a Rocky episode coming up. So you'll find the Lorehounds link in the show notes with the links to all these other podcasts where you can subscribe on your platform of choice. Now, for those of you listening live, see you later this week with our final preview of everything you need to know going into the Acolyte. Bye.
bye.
A new Star Wars journey begins in the place all good journeys begin. At, well, the beginning. This Star Wars Day, I'm excited to introduce the new Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast, where we will piece together the complete story of that galaxy far, far away, in timeline order, from the dawn of the Jedi through the great unknown following the sequel trilogy. This is a podcast for both Star Wars superfans and complete newbies. Listen to the short intro episode now to hear how it works and what to expect over the coming weeks as we set the stage for the new television series The Acolyte, which we will be covering with weekly breakdowns. Subscribe to the Star Wars Canon Timeline podcast wherever you listen to take part in one of the most epic and expansive stories ever told, following all the twists and turns from start to finish. May the 4th be with you all month and beyond.